construction of the new Yale-NUS campus was completed in 2015 with a sustainable design for minimizing environmental impact. With over 600 residents on campus, however, the college makes an impressive footprint with a considerable amount of waste every day. To mitigate this environmental impact, a recycling system is in place, consisting of tri-colored recycling bins around campus, as well as 2 chutes in every residential building. But what happens to the stuff thrown into these facilities? Where do these materials go? So the team decided to investigate exactly how the recycling facilities on campus work. This investigation, however, raised the question of the larger context of recycling in Singapore and the role it plays in creating environmental consciousness in the community. Do your recycling efforts come to fruition? Is recycling as efficient as we imagine it to be? Let's start sorting it out. Let's begin with Sonia, a Yale-NUS sophomore who works at the Cendana Buttery and recycles waste generated from her work there.
My name is Sonia. I'm from the class of 2019. I guess when it's convenient, or like when I have access to like a sink and recycling bins, then I do. But like if I'm eating take out, but I'm not like near a sink, then I'll just throw it away. Okay. Yeah, so it's like most of the time I do, but there are times that I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think like the stuff on campus gets recycled.
I really hope so, because I put in a lot of effort to like wash my things and throw it in the recycle bins, and like I try to tell my friends as well. Yeah, but yeah, I hope so, because we have like a lot of recycling bins around campus. Yeah, and we have the recyclable chutes also in the utility room.
Yes, yes. So you make...
As Sonia did, the production team also had high expectations of the recycling system in school. But the more they thought about it, the more doubtful it became that a single recycling chute could facilitate recycling, since all the recyclables, be they paper, plastic, or metal, would all require further manual sorting. The team emailed the infrastructure department in mid-October last year to find out whether the rubbish thrown down the recycling chutes were sorted out by the janitors. However, they were referred by an infra rep to the senior manager of the NUS Office of Facilities and Management, Mr. Ang Chi-Wee. Mr. Ang acknowledged that there were some differences in the recycling systems between NUS and Yale-NUS.
Actually, I'm not too sure about the system that is currently using in Yale-NUS. But I only know that in terms of design, right, there's some differences lah. Yeah, in terms of recycling bin design. Other than that, I find that it's pretty the same. No? Yeah.
An interview was requested from Yale-NUS's infrastructure department in early November, but no response was given for 3 weeks. As a last resort, the team attended a student government meeting without prior notice to the infra representatives there and asked them how recycling in Yale-NUS was dealt with. The representatives answered that due to safety concerns and the difficulty of separating the materials, only the materials in the bins placed in the common area are actually recycled. Now that we know what happens to the material in the chutes, we come to the recycling bins. Is what we separate and throw into them being discarded as general waste as well? OFM at NUS was kind enough to put the team in touch with ST Paper Resources, the paper recycling vendor for Yale-NUS. The team tracked their vehicle to the paper processing factory in order to track the recyclables collected from Yale-NUS. Here, ST Paper weighs the amount of recyclables that have been collected before unloading and sorting through the recyclables to check for general contamination. The recyclable paper is then processed into cubic shapes. As papers from Yale-NUS were observed being unloaded and processed, it appears that the recyclables thrown into the bin will be recycled so long as they are in the right category and are uncontaminated. Speaking further to the vehicle driver, reconfirmed that the waste thrown down the chutes is not collected. In fact, the cleaning cost for contaminated materials is so high that it is often uneconomical for the vendors to collect them. Thus, janitors do not separate the recyclables thrown down the chutes, and the recycling vendors do not collect unseparated recyclables. This means that if recyclables are not separated into individual bins, recycling efforts will be for naught. Why then does recycling get so little attention? The architect of Yale-NUS's campus may have an answer to that.
So the Green Mark so-called platinum certification is what are the amenities being provided. So it doesn't rate it in terms of the operation when it comes to so-called the waste management. So where your waste management infrastructure are built in, they will give you a certain so-called points for that. But the operation part of it, they don't so-called judge you for that. So to a certain extent, whether how much you actually enforce for the purpose of Green Mark, that is not factored in. So that is really something that either you guys or even the BSA got to think about, whether eventually they come back and review that. They don't come back to check whether how much recycling you're doing. So long as the infrastructure are provided, it is assumed that you will carry that part on. So in terms of the enforcement of the Green Mark Platinum is, for recycling, essentially is provide the infrastructure. The operation part is not part of that certification, so unfortunately. So energy usage is this part.
What about the student body? Why have Yale-NUS students not done anything about this issue? The team spoke to Yale-NUS's student government president for another perspective.
I think part of the reason is that so infra has like 1,000,001 things to do. So I'll repeat my answer. It's okay. So like infra has 1,000,001 things to do, and I think if they see that this is perhaps not a priority for the student body, then they won't necessarily put it on their priority list as well. So I think it's great that like you all are doing this sort of advocacy for recycling, and so like hopefully this will cause infra to take more note and to incorporate it into their daily logistics and planning as well.
On the other hand, another explanation is that the student body simply does not know enough about recycling. In a survey sent to 201 students, in which 37.3% of them are freshmen, 24.9% sophomore, 16.4% juniors, and 21.4% seniors, recipients were asked if they knew what happens to an empty pizza box that is thrown into the paper recycling bin. 42.3% of students did not know that it is discarded as general waste. This highlights a general lack of knowledge about recycling in Yale-NUS. So how can the recycling situation at Yale-NUS be improved? To increase individual recycling, 38% of respondents indicated that more information about recycling was needed. 82% of respondents were in favor of having more recycling bins in either dining halls, second floors of individual colleges, suites, or sky gardens. This may not be the most practical solution in terms of finance or human resources, but the results suggest that this is one of the most popular ways to increase recycling participation. Telling students to separate recyclables is not enough. So long as Yale-NUS continues to use source-separated collectors, unseparated recyclables will continue to be discarded. Even if Yale-NUS achieves a 100% recycling rate, how significant would this change be? How should the problem be understood in the greater context of Singapore? To put things in perspective, the team consulted Professor Marvin Montefrio, who pointed out the systemic challenge of increasing recycling rates in Singapore.
So like for example, if there must be an explanation why, for example, plastics in Singapore only gets recycled. The recycling rate of plastic in Singapore is just a meager 7%. Many explanations. Maybe one possible explanation is the sorting. Maybe the sorting is not efficient. One possible explanation is maybe there's not too many industries out there that actually recycle plastics. Right? So there is a system constraint there, right? Whatever the reason for that system constraint is. And that significantly constrains any other institution within Singapore. So even if you go beyond a sorting rate that is higher than any other part of Singapore, it would hit that wall, right? Once it actually goes out of the institution. Right? So, let's say
The municipal recycling rate in Singapore is only 19%, which is quite low as compared to other OECD countries such as Japan, the UK, and Korea. Why is the Singaporean household recycling rate so low? To find out why, the team spoke to Plastic Light Singapore an environmental NGO that has been working to reduce
It's
plastic
at
waste
19%.
generation locally.
And a big reason is this. There are about 9,000 of these blue bins island-wide, and the proximity to the household is about, the max they would have to walk to a bin is 150 meters. And some places it'll be really close, but the maximum is at 150. So it's not a really long walk to walk with your recyclables. But the current state of these blue bins is this. You can see that it has styrofoams. Styrofoam containers are not recyclable at all. And you can also see that there is a half-consumed beverage over here. There's another one over here. So these make the contents of recyclables wet. They stain them, they contaminate them. So when a blue bin, the contents of blue bin get contaminated with either food or liquid, it's rejected and it's directly incinerated. So
Plastic Light's findings seem to concur with those of ST Paper Resources, who also mentions that one of the greatest challenges to recycling is contamination.
For paper, the problem is that we cannot wash. So when it's contaminated, even once you contaminate ketchup or whatever, that's it. The whole bag.
So why is there such a high contamination rate? Our interviewees seem to point us towards the education system in Singapore.
There's the community level, and there's a community also comes under schools. Everything comes under community, and educating children. They don't see their parents recycling. The environment should be a mainstream subject, like as in it should be a module, and it shouldn't be just a 1 or 2 hour lesson where they're just taught the 3 R's and what are the 3 R's and what they can do. So it's just a 1 or 2 hour class. They go home, there's no recycling. In their own schools, there is no recycling. My son goes to a school where there are no recycling bins. And there's one bin where they are saying you can throw your recyclables, but the children just throw everything in there. So the recycling bin is contaminated. And they're not taught the right way to recycle. So there comes the problem, where they are not taught to implement.
The team also discovered that information on recyclable materials can be quite confusing. Both NEA and NUS were sent a list of items to find out if they were recyclable. Although the answers were the same from both parties, some doubts still remain. For instance, what happens to unwashed plastic containers? Will they simply be discarded as general waste? The team also questions how practical it is to recycle certain materials in Singapore. According to Planet Ark, an environmental NGO in Australia, the unknown contents of plastic bags can be dangerous for workers at the recycling station to open. They can also get trapped at the conveyor belts or jam moving parts and can bring the entire sorting station to a halt. As a result, they're often just removed from the recycling system. Is the situation different in Singapore? How are we dealing with this issue? According to our interviewees, education seems to be the most important solution to improving our recycling system. But education isn't only about teaching the next generation, it's also about informing the current generation more about recycling. But even after all this talk of recycling, one question still remains. Is it truly effective in saving the environment? Some students and professors at Yale-NUS offer a different perspective.
Within the framework of consumption is necessary, then by all means, recycling is the better option. But if we take a step back and look at the bigger picture, the problem, we're not really trying to tackle the problem if we just work within consumption and just try to make consumption sustainable. Because if you think about it, like the human population in the past few years has been exponentially increasing. All the advances in medical science and all that kind of stuff. We're living longer, right? More babies are being born. So the human population is growing really, really fast. Consumption evidently grows really, really fast as well. It's unsustainable for us to keep going in that general direction where like we just keep increasing the consumption of products and we try to find a way or sort of like find a solution within that framework where this capitalistic framework where we just, buy, use.
So
That's not, like, if in terms of sustainability, future sustainability, that's unrealistic to expect any sort of sustainability to come out of that. Consumption needs to be reduced. That's why I think consumption needs to be reduced. It's not enough to just try to solve the problem and allow consumption to perpetuate.
I would love to see that recycling effort joined with an initiative to reduce overall waste flows in Singapore by half. Wouldn't that be great? You know, Singapore could model a reuse economy. We could find every possible way of reusing rather than disposing and recycling, which creates far more pollution and uses far more energy than reusing. So I think that the distinctiveness that's within Singapore's grasp, the challenge for Singapore as a model of sustainable urban living for the rest of the planet would be to imagine how we get to a reusable economy in which recycling is sort of the thing you kind of have to do when we haven't quite figured out how to implement a reuse solution or aspect to something. So I would love to see reuse and reduce as the centerpiece, with recycling being a really important addition that you do when you just can't quite figure out how to reuse or reduce. And if we could do that in Singapore, that would be the model for the rest of the world. Because many cities in the rest of the world are now doing material separation at the point of collection at plants and spinning that off. So Singapore wouldn't be rising to its reputation as a place of innovation if it just adopted other technologies. The real oomph will come in sort of taking it to the next level. And there are plenty of examples where communities and cities have pushed towards reuse and reduce. We could learn from those experiences, but then we could also use our own expertise to model something really fantastic.
We recycle because we want to save the earth. But at the end of the day, a complete overhaul of Yale-NUS's recycling culture needs to happen with regard to its infrastructure and social norms. As this investigation has shown, not only does Yale-NUS's recycling system have to be improved, but the effectiveness of recycling for environmental conservation also has to be re-examined. Is recycling the best solution to reduce our environmental footprint? What should we as citizens do? What's the best approach to waste management for a rapidly globalizing world? Now it's your turn to think.